Marcus was 31 years old and he was exhausted. Not the kind of exhausted that a good night of sleep fixes. The kind of exhausted that comes from years of working hard and going nowhere. He had two jobs, a small apartment with a leaking roof, and a drawer full of bills he kept face down so he did not have to look at them. Every morning his alarm went off at 7, he hit snooze twice, dragged himself out of bed, and started another day that looked exactly like the one before it. He was not lazy, he was not stupid, he just had no idea that the life he wanted was sitting quietly on the other side of a single habit he had never tried. One morning that all changed, not because something dramatic happened, but because his neighbor knocked on his door at 5 in the morning and accidentally showed him something that would alter the entire direction of his life. Marcus and his neighbor Thomas had lived in the same building for 3 years. Thomas was not rich either. He drove an old car, wore simple clothes, and brought lunch from home every day. But there was something different about Thomas that Marcus had always noticed without being able to name it. Thomas never seemed rushed. He never seemed stressed. And slowly, over those 3 years, small things around Thomas had begun to change. A better car, a small business he mentioned starting, a quiet confidence that had not been there before. That morning, Thomas knocked on Marcus's door by accident, meant to knock on the door across the hall. But when Marcus opened the door half asleep and confused, Thomas laughed and apologized. Then he paused and looked at Marcus carefully and said, "You should come with me." Marcus, too tired to argue, grabbed his jacket and followed him out into the dark. It was 5 in the morning. The streets were empty. The city was completely still. Marcus had never been outside at this hour unless he was coming home from a late shift. Thomas walked to a small park 2 blocks away, sat on a bench, and opened a worn notebook. Marcus sat beside him, still half asleep, and asked what they were doing. Thomas smiled and said, "This is my hour. This one right here. Before the noise starts. Before anyone needs anything from me. Before the day tells me what to do. This hour belongs to me." He explained that 18 months ago he had started waking up at 5 every single morning, not to exercise, though he sometimes did, not to meditate, though he sometimes did that too, but primarily to think, to plan, to sit quietly with the version of his life he actually wanted and figure out what needed to happen to get there. He said that before 5 a.m. he had always been reacting to life. After 5 a.m. he started directing it. Marcus went home that morning and could not stop thinking about what Thomas had said, reacting to life versus directing it. He realized with a slow, uncomfortable clarity that every single day of his adult life he had been purely reactive. He woke up late, rushed to work, handled whatever problems came at him, came home exhausted, watched something on his phone until he fell asleep, and repeated the whole cycle. He had no time that was truly his, no space to think about what he actually wanted, no quiet in which to hear his own voice. The next morning, Marcus set his alarm for 5. When it went off, he sat up in bed and felt the pull to lie back down with a force that surprised him. But he thought of Thomas sitting on that bench with his notebook, and he got up. He made coffee. He sat at his kitchen table in the silence and simply asked himself a question he had not asked in years. What do I actually want my life to look like? The first few mornings he just sat there. He had no answers. His mind kept drifting to the bills, to his jobs, to everything he did not have. But slowly, over the first week, something began to happen. In the quiet of 5 a.m., with no distractions, no notifications, no demands from anyone else, his real thoughts began to surface. He started writing things down, small ideas at first, then bigger ones. He had always been good with his hands and had spent years fixing things in his apartment that the landlord never bothered with. He started writing about that, about what it would look like to turn that skill into something real. Within 3 months of his 5 a.m. habit, Marcus had researched, planned, and launched a small handyman service on weekends. It brought in almost nothing at first, but he kept showing up to that kitchen table every morning and kept refining the plan. By the end of the first year, he had enough clients to leave one of his 2 jobs. By the end of the second year, he had left both. He told people it was the 5 a.m. that changed everything, and they would nod politely and assume he meant the early start. But Marcus would shake his head and explain that it was not really about the time. It was about what the time represented. It was the first hour in his adult life that belonged entirely to him. No boss, no customer, no obligation, just him and the question of what he was going to do with the one life he had been given. That one quiet hour each morning became the foundation on which everything else was built. Thomas, by the way, eventually opened that small business he had been planning in his notebook. The 2 of them still meet at that park bench sometimes, still in the dark, still before the city wakes up, and they sit there in the quiet and think and plan and remind each other that the most important work of the day always happens before the world starts asking things of you. You do not need to wake up at 5 in the morning to change your life, but you do need to find your hour, the one that belongs only to you, the one where the noise stops and your real voice gets a chance to speak. Because the truth is that most people never hear that voice, not because it is not there, but because they never give it enough quiet to be heard. Marcus was not special. He was not gifted with unusual talent or extraordinary luck. He was just a tired man who one morning chose to get up instead of going back to sleep. And in that one choice made quietly and without applause, the rest of his life began. Your hour is waiting. The only question is whether you are willing to get up and meet it. If this story meant something to you today, please share it with one person who needs to hear it. Subscribe for more stories and lessons like this every single week. And drop a comment below telling me what you would do with one quiet hour that belonged only to you. I read every comment and I would genuinely love to know. Now set the alarm. Tomorrow is already waiting for you.